Hi everyone. So it has actually been almost like 2 months since this race took place, but honestly school has just been really busy and I've had some other things that I've wanted to prioritize with posting, but I've finally gotten around to putting together this video. But this is almost a whole mile by mile journey through my first marathon and probably my only marathon, to be 100% honest. But I tried to take little video clips at every mile, and I'm just going to be explaining how I was feeling throughout the race. Enjoy!
Mile 1, mile 2, 4 miles down, 5 miles.
I feel like the first 6 miles of this race were really easy. It was probably 70 degrees, overcast, pretty humid, but it didn't rain, which was good. And everyone was just having a good time. The first probably 10 miles of this race were either flat or downhill, and the first 6 or 7 miles were downhill, not in a really aggressive way. So it definitely, it didn't bother my knees or anything, but it was downhill, and so I feel like that made it a little bit easier because I didn't have any big hills to go up.
Mile 7, 8 miles down, mile 9, mile 10.
So one of my goals was to run 10 miles without stopping, or the first 10 miles without stopping, and I did achieve that. I ended up saving my first bathroom break for mile 10. I wanted to get to double digits before I allowed myself to stop, and then if I was gonna stop and walk, I thought I might as well go to the bathroom. So I did end up achieving that goal, and I would say the first 10 miles of this race were pretty okay. I didn't have my music in for very much of it just because I was really enjoying the vibes of the race. I was really enjoying talking with some of my fellow racers and hearing the encouragement from all of the supporters. There were a lot of supporters the first half of the race for the half marathon, and so the first 10 miles were all in all really enjoyable for me.
Mile 11, all of the half marathon people have turned off. Mile 12, 13 miles, almost halfway there.
So, fun thing about having a marathon and a half marathon race together. There are so many supporters and so many runners the first to 12 miles of the race, and then at one point they kind of veered off around 11 and a half miles. They veered off and went to finish, and there were so many people screaming you're almost there, you're almost there. And for the half marathoners that was so true, but for the poor unfortunate souls, me being one of them that was doing a full marathon, we weren't even halfway there. And then the amount of runners and the amount of supporters went down considerably after the half marathon finish, which I knew was gonna happen, but I definitely thought that there was going to be more runners and more supporters than there were. So actually the majority of the last half of the race I was pretty much running by myself. My husband was obviously there meeting me when he could, although Rochester was kind of hard for him to navigate, especially with finding free parking. And then there definitely weren't as many supporters cheering on the marathoners for the last half of the race. So the last half of the race ended up being more of a mental game than I had originally thought it was going to be.
Mile 15, starting to get painful.
I was not able to train for much of the last 2 months before the marathon. I ran my half marathon in March and it went really well, and my plan was just to do another 8 weeks of training, 8 to 10 weeks of training after that, and then run the marathon. Well, things did not go according to plan. I had some IT band syndrome that was really bothering me after the half marathon, and it took me a long time to actually figure out what was the sort of root cause behind that pain. And so I spent most of the time, most of those 2 months cross training, and I really, I tried to get like as much impact as I could on my joints so that, my knees wouldn't be as big of a problem as they ended up being. I tried to make sure I was still doing plyometric stuff. Like, I tried everything I could to stay physically prepared for this race, but unfortunately the lack of me running on pavement, which this whole race was on pavement, it really started to kind of show up around mile 15, and I started just to have some pain in my knees. And I knew from it wasn't the IT band pain, it wasn't that, it was definitely more of like just a pounding, like inflammation, pain. And so I knew that pain was not going to go away. I knew that the only thing that was going to make that feel better was for me to stop.
16 miles. Mile 17. 18 miles. They don't call 20 miles the pain cave for nothing.
Okay, they decided to throw in like some really steep and long hills around mile 20 and 21. And I had done a pretty decent job of not walking. I had maybe walked for a couple like 1 minute bouts, up until this point. Really only a couple though. Most of the times that I had stopped running, it was to like go to the bathroom or get water from Keller. And so I hadn't really walked a lot until I got to these hills, and then I walked for a couple minutes because it really took it out of me. And I was definitely hurting a little bit more. It wasn't affecting my running form. I was still, I wasn't limping. I was definitely taking much smaller steps. And I definitely was not lifting my legs up as high. But it wasn't affecting my running form in the sense of like I was limping or like compensating in that way. But yeah, mile 20 and 21 were definitely not fun.
Okay, mile 21. It's just about grinding from here. I'm hurting, but I'm in good spirits. 4.2 miles left. Let's go. 23 miles. About a 5K left.
So 22 and a half miles through 25 were pretty tough. I was running by myself. There were very few spectators. Keller had decided that it was best for him to just wait at the finish line, so I knew I wasn't going to be seeing him again. I was getting all these text messages from my family, saying that I was, doing really well, but I was hurting quite a bit. And again, the only thing that made it better was to walk, but I really had this goal of wanting to finish in, 4 hours and 30 minutes or less. And I knew that if I were to keep walking, that I was not going to be able to achieve that goal. And, especially once I got to about 23 miles, I knew that there was only a 5K left, but that 5K seemed so daunting. Because I knew like this pain that I was experiencing wasn't going to go away. And it's hard. My attitude for the most part was pretty good throughout this whole race. You know, I said in that one clip that like my spirits were still high, and that was fairly true. But the last 5K was really, really tough. And I knew I was gonna finish. I knew it was gonna happen, but yeah, I was hurting.
24 miles. I've walked a lot more than I've wanted to. I'm deep in the pain cave. 25 miles. Almost there.
So the funny thing about this race is that according to my watch, I ended up running almost like 26 and a half miles. I don't know if I just took some wide corners or something, but according to my watch, I ran a little bit extra. And so my watch kept telling me, oh, like, congratulations, you just ran a marathon. But I wasn't close to the finish line yet. Like, I could hear the finish line and I knew it wasn't that far away, but I couldn't see it yet. And so the way that the finish worked is that you went under this bridge on a trail and it kind of did like a loop. And then once you got like done with the loop, you were on top of the bridge and then you could see the finish line. And so it was at that point I started to speed up a little bit. I recognized like I'm almost done. There was one man in particular that I don't know if I think he was a runner who had already finished, and I don't know if he could like see the discomfort that I was experiencing or what, but I started kind of revving up for my finish, and he just like, he stared right in my eyes and just said like, you're doing amazing. And that was when it started to get emotional. Like I wasn't super emotional for most of the race, but as soon as he said that to me and I turned the corner and I saw the finish line, I started to get very emotional. I'm getting emotional now, just remembering it. But I was at the end of, you know, a couple hours of being uncomfortable and progressively more and more uncomfortable. And so to hear him, you know, really just like stare into my soul and tell me that I was doing a good job, and to see the finish line, and I saw Keller on the other side of the finish line, and I knew that I could stop so soon. I definitely started to get emotional. And here's a clip of me finishing.
Hey, Haley. Haley DePel coming down. Haley is rocking a great looking tat on her left shoulder. She's put on the other one. She had a big smile as she came across the finish line.
And I was done. My official time was 4 hours and 27 minutes. So I did end up achieving my goal of running under 4.5 hours, which was pretty awesome. And I did finish with a smile on my face, and I'd like to think that I had a good attitude for most of the race. So this was another successful race in my opinion, even though it didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. I still count it as a success because I was able to achieve my goals. You'll see in the clip that I'm running with like kind of like outward chicken wings. I had chafed on my armpits. I hadn't chafed anywhere else, but on my armpits, I've forgotten my little Body Glide stuff. So yeah, if I'm looking a little funny or running a little funny, that's why. It's because I was trying not to rub my arms on my chafing armpits. But I was the only one finishing at the time. They called out my name, although they said my last name incorrectly, but that's fine, everyone does. And I got my medal, and right after I got my medal, you can see in the clip, the lady was like, oh, you have to ring the PR bell, because you couldn't hear it in the clip, but apparently he had announced that it was my first marathon. And so I went to the PR bell and I got to ring the PR bell, which was fun. And then Keller came over right after and I gave him a big hug and I just started bawling. I was like, I can't believe I just did that. Like, I was so mentally and physically exhausted. I just started crying. And I remember the woman that gave me my medal was like, oh, you guys are so cute. But it was a really awesome moment. And I'm thankful that it wasn't a really packed finish line, because I feel like I was able to enjoy that moment with Keller without being sort of like shoved along. But yeah, so that was the end of my race.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the day after my first marathon. I did about a half an hour of some really gentle yoga, and now I'm just going on a little walk. And overall I feel pretty good. The more I move, the better I feel. And I mean, the only thing, my left outer hip area is a little bit sore and tight, but otherwise I feel pretty good. My knees, are a little inflamed, which is to be expected if you're doing marathon on all concrete. But for the most part, I feel pretty good. So praise be to God. I was a little nervous about doing a marathon with that little of training the last 6 weeks, what kind of injuries I might sustain, but thankfully I think I prepared as best as I could, and I think I prevented as many injuries as I could, and I feel really grateful. I do have one blister on my right big toe, so that stinks, but just slapped a band-aid on and it'll be fine. So yeah, feeling good. Still super happy with how yesterday went, even though there were times where it was definitely painful.
Now that I am, 2 months out of the race, I can tell you that I did not sustain any injuries during that race. I took about a week off before I did my first run. And I had a little bit of that ITBS, but not much. Some of the things that I had done to address it before the marathon were still working, and so I had a little bit of that, but not anything substantial. I didn't have any bone stress injuries. I didn't have any tendons that were mad at me. I had definitely some sore muscles, but I walked away without sustaining any injuries, even though I really wasn't able to train the last 8 weeks. So that's the story of my first marathon 2 months ago. I don't know if I'd ever do another one. I might have some interest in doing maybe like a trail ultra marathon, maybe a 50K. I don't know if I'll actually ever do that, to be 100% honest, but I think that would be the only way that I would train that long of a distance again. But I don't know if I see myself enjoying the half marathon or the marathon as much as I do the half marathon. I think if I would have had a different training block going into the marathon, maybe I would be feeling differently, but I feel like the training load for the half marathon is so much more manageable, especially when you're a full-time grad student. It's so much more manageable. And I don't quite get to the point where I'm in like the pain cave with the half marathon. And so I think what I'm probably going to stick to is just doing a bunch of half marathons, and maybe finding some scenic ones, maybe a trail half marathon. I've never done that before. It's just been road races, and so I think that's probably what I'm going to stick to, is half marathon and under for the most part. But I am really happy that I did it. It was definitely a physical and mental and emotional experience, but I'm really happy that I did it, and I'm so thankful for everyone who is cheering me on, and for Keller, giving up an entire Friday night and Saturday to just watch me run. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.